My dad said, "Well, we don't celebrate failures." That's the first thing he said when I called to invite him to my son's birthday. Not how's Micah, not what time is the party, just that we don't celebrate failures. Like I was asking him to clap for a broken dream. And my sister, Lana, she laughed, literally laughed. She said, "Why would we come to her kid's birthday?" Like Micah was just some mistake I'd dragged into the world. Like the fact that I was a single mom with a part-time job meant his life didn't deserve balloons and cake. But they still came. I didn't expect them to. I really didn't. They showed up, all stiff and silent like they were attending a school play they'd been guilt-tripped into. Dad with his arms crossed, Lana texting under the table, and then my son opened the cake box. There was a photo inside, just a single photo. No words, no explanation. And suddenly, the room changed. Micah looked at it, then everyone else did. My dad didn't say a thing. He stood up, walked out the back door, and never came back inside. My sister didn't laugh, not once. Her phone stayed face down. My mom cried so quietly I almost missed it. That photo, that moment, was the crack that finally shattered the cold wall I'd been hitting my whole life. I know what you're thinking. What kind of photo could do that? And maybe you're wondering who I am, why this even matters. Well, I'm Tessa Rain, 32. Mother to the most brilliant little boy on earth. And for most of my life, I was the one no one clapped for. Not when I got my GED, not when I landed my first job, not even when I gave birth alone, terrified, holding on to nothing but a hospital blanket and hope. My dad, Gerald Rain, believes in winners. He raised us like a coach, not a father. You didn't cry, you didn't complain. You won, or you kept your mouth shut until you did. Emotions were weakness. Hard work speaks, everything else is noise, he used to say. I guess I was the noise. Lana, my older sister, played by his rules. She became everything I wasn't. Business major, corporate job, married to a guy who wears sweater vests and says things like, "Golf isn't a game, it's a mindset." She doesn't say it out loud, but she looks at my thrift store jeans and Micah's hand-me-down sneakers like we're something she needs to explain away. My mom, Elaine, is, well, she's kind, quiet. She folds conflict into napkins and tucks it under plates. She doesn't fight for me, but I think she wants to. I just don't think she knows how. And then there's Micah. My son, my sunshine, the only person who's ever made me feel like I'm more than what I didn't become. He's 6, talks to plants, hugs too hard, thinks every birthday should have a theme. This year, he picked space. He told me 2 weeks ago, "I want everybody to come this year, even Grandpa, even Aunt Lana." I smiled. I lied. I said, "We'll try." But in my head, I thought, they're never coming, baby. Not for us. And yet, somehow, there they were. Micah didn't know what that photo was. Not yet. But I did. And I knew, when he lifted that cake lid with frosting on his cheeks and eyes full of hope, that it wasn't just a birthday anymore. It was a reckoning. A story they never cared to ask about now staring them in the face. So if you're here thinking this is some heartwarming family reunion story, it's not. It's the story of a woman they wrote off, a child they dismissed, and a moment they'll never forget, because the truth has a way of showing up, even if it has to be baked inside a birthday cake. So stay with me. Let me tell you what happened before the photo, before the silence, before the door closed behind my father, maybe forever. Let me tell you about the birthday that changed everything. I used to think if I worked hard enough, they'd eventually see me. Not just look at me, but see me. The real me. Not the girl who dropped out of college, or the one who showed up pregnant at 25 without a ring. Not the disappointment they whispered about during holiday dinners, or the family member they barely mentioned in Facebook posts. Just me, Tessa, a woman, a mother, a survivor. But in my family, recognition is reserved for achievement, and in their eyes, I've never earned it. We live in a small town outside Austin. Not a whole lot happens here, which means the few things that do, everybody hears about. When I left Darren, Micah's father, after he drained my bank account and told me I was too sensitive to be loved, the whispers started. When I started selling freelance illustrations while working night shifts at a nursing home, they rolled their eyes. They said it wasn't a real career. That's how things have always been with my family. My father, Gerald, is a retired military man who now runs his own logistics firm. Everything about him is sharp, his tone, his suits, even the way he folds his napkin. He's the type who believes in structure over sentiment. In his world, emotions are liabilities, and success is measured in promotions, not perseverance. He grew up poor, built everything from nothing, and never lets us forget it. I think he was proud of us once. Maybe before we started making decisions that didn't align with his version of winning. My mother, Elaine, keeps to herself. She's the kind of woman who never takes the last slice of cake, who apologizes when you bump into her. She tries to mediate, but Gerald's shadow is a big one, and she's been living in it for decades. I know she loves me. I just think she's scared to say it too loud. And then there's Lana, my older sister. If Gerald is a general, Lana is his golden lieutenant. Perfect GPA, Ivy League education, married with 2 kids and a dog named Copper. She speaks in bullet points, vacation photos, PTA meetings. She once called me reckless, and I remember how her voice didn't even crack, like she wasn't slicing me open with it. We weren't always like this. There was a time when Lana and I would sneak out at night, lie on the trampoline, and make up stories about the stars. She wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to draw comics, but somewhere along the line we stopped dreaming together and started silently competing. And I lost. When I had Micah, I thought everything would change, that maybe this tiny human with my nose and Darren's dimples would open some door in their hearts. But when I told them I was keeping the baby, Gerald said, "That's your choice, but don't expect us to clean it up." Lana didn't even call. She just sent me a link to a parenting podcast, so I built a life on my own, piece by piece. Cracked hands, missed bills, bedtime lullabies on days I hadn't slept in 36 hours. But Micah made it worth it. He's gentle in ways I've never known. He talks to worms, hugs strangers, and says things like, "Mommy, I think the moon follows me because it likes my energy." He is, without question, the best thing I've ever done. And now he was turning 7. Weeks before his birthday, he told me he wanted everyone to come, not just his friends from school, but our family, people he barely knew but believed loved him anyway. I didn't want to say no. I couldn't. So I swallowed my pride, wrote the invitations by hand, and mailed them out. One to Gerald, one to Elaine, one to Lana. The responses came fast. Gerald, "We don't celebrate failures." Lana, "Why would we come to her kid's birthday?" Elaine, no reply, just silence. The loudest kind. I wanted to cancel the party. I wanted to cry. But then I looked at Micah, standing on a chair decorating the fridge with paper stars, and I knew I couldn't fall apart, not in front of him. I plastered a smile on my face, kissed the top of his head, and said, "This is going to be the best birthday ever." And in a way, it was. Just not for the reasons anyone expected. Because buried beneath that cake, waiting in a photo I had nearly thrown away years ago, was the truth they never wanted to hear. And once they saw it, none of us would ever be the same. There's a moment, just after a kid asks you a question you can't answer, where your throat tightens, but you smile anyway. Micah and I were sitting on the porch. He had a crayon tucked behind his ear and cake frosting on his shirt. He was making hand-drawn invitations for his space birthday, and suddenly he looked up and said, "Mommy, do you think Grandpa will bring me a rocket ship?" My stomach sank, not because of the question itself, but because of the way he said Grandpa, like he knew him, like Gerald was part of his world, when in reality, he'd only met him twice. Once when he was a baby, too young to remember, and again at my mom's birthday last year, where Gerald spent the entire visit watching a football game and ignoring Micah completely. I reached over, fixed his little cowlick, and said, "I don't know, baby. Maybe." That maybe was all I could offer. That and the illusion that his family might someday care. But the truth was his birthday was coming fast and nobody had RSVP'd. Not my dad, not Lana, not even my mom. A few classmates' moms texted their confirmations, which gave me some relief, but it felt hollow, like I was putting together a performance of Happy Family for my son while the real cast refused to show. I was trying not to spiral, but every text ping made my stomach turn. One night, while packing party favors with Micah asleep on the couch, I got a message from Lana. It said, "Can't make the party. It's Brian's golf tournament, and maybe next year." No punctuation. No apology. Just like that. I stared at the screen, And I don't even know why I replied, but I did. "You haven't seen your nephew in over a year. You couldn't spare 2 hours?" Her reply came back 5 minutes later. "Tessa, we don't do charity birthdays. You made your choices." I put my phone down. Not because I was done, because if I kept looking at it, I would have thrown it across the room. That phrase, "you made your choices," has been following me around for years. It's how they explain away everything they don't want to understand. My broken marriage, my choice, my freelance work instead of a 9 to 5, my choice. Raising a kid alone with no help, my choice. But they never asked why I made those choices or what it cost me. Micah deserved better than this, better than half-effort relatives and pity RSVPs. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't let myself feel. Anger. Not the explosive kind. The cold, quiet kind that simmers right behind your eyes. The kind that makes you realize you're done begging for kindness. So I did something I wasn't sure I had the strength to do. I went into the closet, opened the worn shoebox on the top shelf, and pulled out the ultrasound photo. It was faded, curled at the edges, but it still showed them both. 2 tiny figures, twin boys. I used to sit up late at night and stare at it when I was pregnant, back when I still believed Darren might come around, before he told me he couldn't handle twins and left me sobbing in a clinic waiting room, before I lost Noah at 22 weeks and had to explain to nurses why I was alone in the delivery room. No one ever knew about him, not even my parents. I told them Micah came early. I didn't say he came half alive, but Noah was real. He mattered. And this year, as Micah turned 7, Noah would have too. I held the photo like it was made of glass, and then I knew what I had to do. Micah's cake box wasn't going to just hold a dessert. It was going to hold the truth. I called my friend Natalie, who runs a local bakery. I told her I wanted something special, a space-themed cake with a hidden compartment inside the base, lined and sealed, where I could place a photo. "Like a time capsule?" she asked. "More like a time bomb," I said quietly. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about making anyone feel guilty. It was about acknowledgement. If they were going to show up, they were going to see all of us, me, Micah, and the brother he never got to meet. That night, I sat at the table and wrote their names on place cards anyway. Gerald, Elaine, Lana. I didn't think they'd come, but I knew if they did, this time, they wouldn't leave unchanged. The morning of Micah's birthday, I stood in the kitchen staring at a pack of black balloons and thinking, what if no one comes? It was a thought that had circled me all week. I tried to push it away, but it kept returning, usually late at night, when the house was quiet and the only sound was Micah, snoring softly in his room, surrounded by little plastic rockets. I kept telling myself, this was about him, not them. Not about my father's silence or Lana's insults or my mom's hesitation. But deep down, I think I needed this party as much as Micah did, maybe more. So I did what I always do when the panic creeps in. I got to work. I made a checklist. String up the galaxy streamers. Set out the DIY astronaut helmets Micah and I made from cardboard. Put glow-in-the-dark stars on the chairs. Tape the hand-drawn invitations to the gift table. Pick up the cake from Natalie's bakery. And most importantly, place the photo. I left that for last. I wrapped it in a small, clear sleeve, added a strip of stiff cardboard to keep it flat, and slid it into the hidden pocket beneath the cake base. Natalie had designed the box exactly how I asked. A small secret slot just under the removable layer of the platform. It wouldn't be visible unless someone lifted the cake. It was perfect. Silent still. And waiting. That morning, Micah ran out of his room in his Commander Micah shirt with foil stars taped to the back like a cape. He hugged my legs and shouted, "It's my launch day, Mommy." I laughed, kissed the top of his head, and said, "Yes, sir, Captain Ready." We spent the morning setting up the backyard. My neighbor Hannah brought over extra chairs. Her son James was Micah's best friend. They spent an hour chasing each other around in their little astronaut helmets, giggling and yelling made-up rocket sounds. At noon, the first guests arrived. A few school friends, 2 other moms from Micah's class, one of my coworkers from the clinic. It was enough to make it feel like a real party, enough to distract from the empty chairs with names I'd written on them in silver marker. Grandpa, Aunt Lana, Grandma. And then, around 12:45, a car door slammed. I looked up from pouring juice into paper cups and froze. It was my father. Gerald stepped out of his silver truck like he was walking into a boardroom. Tan slacks, crisp shirt, sunglasses, arms crossed. I couldn't read his face, but he walked toward the gate without hesitating. Behind him, slowly, came my mother. She was carrying a small present wrapped in gold paper. And, somehow, Lana, in heels, holding a purse way too fancy for a backyard birthday. Micah squealed, ran to the gate, and said, "Grandpa, you came!" Gerald looked down, and for a moment his expression softened. He nodded once. "Happy birthday, kid." No hug, but he was there. Micah turned to me, beaming. "Mommy, they came." I smiled, heart pounding. "I see that." For the next hour, they sat stiffly under the shade tent, not talking much. Lana scrolled her phone. Gerald made a few polite comments to Hannah. My mom helped me refill the chip bowls. It was civil. Cold, but civil. And then it was cake time. I brought the box out carefully, the stars Micah had drawn on the side in crayon still visible. Natalie had done an amazing job, three-tiered, covered in navy fondant with little planets, comets, and a tiny sugar figurine of Micah in a space helmet on top. Everyone sang. Micah closed his eyes and whispered something before blowing out the candles. I leaned in. "What did you wish for?" He grinned. "That they'll want to stay." I nodded. "Let's cut the cake, Commander." As I started slicing, I gently lifted the cake platform to get the server, and that's when it happened. Micah leaned over and spotted the envelope hidden beneath. "Mommy, what's that?" He reached down and pulled it out. Everyone's eyes followed him. He peeled back the flap and looked at the photo. He tilted his head. "Is that me?" I knelt beside him, my voice barely a whisper. "That's you and your brother." His name was Noah. The table fell silent. Micah looked again, his tiny fingers brushing the corner. "I had a brother?" I nodded, choking back tears. "You still do. He just couldn't stay." I looked up and saw it. My mother's face crumpled. Lana had lowered her phone, and my father... Gerald stood slowly, stared at the photo for a long moment, then turned, walked out of the tent, across the yard, and into the house without saying a word. And just like that, the party changed. Micah held the ultrasound photo so gently, like he knew, somehow, that it was sacred. He turned to me, confused but calm, and asked again, "So, he's my twin?" I nodded, my voice steady even though my heart was racing. "Yes, his name was Noah. You were born early, but he wasn't strong enough. He passed before I ever held him." I expected Micah to cry or maybe ask 1,000 questions like he always did. But instead, he just looked down at the picture, then back up at me and whispered, "Can I keep this?" I felt something tighten in my throat. "Of course," I said. He smiled and held the photo to his chest, like Noah was real now, like he'd always been missing something and finally knew what it was. That's when I noticed the adults. The silence around us wasn't just polite anymore. It was thick, charged. You could feel it in the air like the moment before a storm breaks. Lana was frozen, phone forgotten in her lap, her mouth slightly open. Elaine, my mom, was sitting beside her, eyes wet, one trembling hand covering her mouth. Then my dad, Gerald, gone. He'd walked into the house without saying a word. I stood up, brushing cake crumbs from my hands. I could feel the weight of every stare. Micah had gone back to his friends, holding the photo like a secret badge of honor, giggling again as if he hadn't just dropped a truth bomb that shattered our family's silence. Lana was the first to speak. "You never told anyone." I didn't move. "No," I said, because the day I came home from the hospital, Dad asked if I'd figured my life out yet. Not how I was doing, not what happened, just that. Lana's face twisted, not in anger, but something closer to guilt. She looked down at her lap. For once, she had no clever comeback. Elaine finally spoke. Her voice was so soft I almost missed it. "I should have asked. I should have been there." I turned to her, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel resentment. I felt grief. Grief for what we could have had. Grief for the mother I think she wanted to be and the daughter I couldn't afford to be. "I was so scared," I said. "You all saw me as a failure, and maybe I was, but I was also trying to stay alive. For Micah, for Noah, even if I only had him for a little while." Elaine reached for my hand, and I let her take it. Her grip was shaking, but it was the first time she'd touched me without awkward distance in years. We sat like that for a minute. Lana quietly reached into her purse and pulled out a tissue, dabbing her eyes without a word. She didn't say sorry, but her silence felt different this time, less cruel, more cracked. And then we heard the door open. Gerald came back out. He wasn't looking at anyone. He walked past the party tent, past the balloon arch Micah and I had built with a $10 kit, and placed something on the gift table, a small white envelope. Then he walked toward me. I braced for something cold. A lecture, a deflection. Something like, "You should have told us." But he didn't say any of that. He stood in front of me and looked at the space where Micah was playing. "I didn't know," he said. 3 words, that's all. But his voice cracked at the end. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. He looked at me again, and for the first time in my entire adult life, my father didn't look disappointed. He looked small. Like the weight of everything he never said had finally settled on his shoulders.